Hello, Region, and welcome back to We the People, hosted by John Allen every Thursday at 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. And we just heard from Chef Blake a little bit talking about his new business coming to Gary. Those things like that always excite me. So almost at any time of the show, no matter what the subject, you can catch me digressing, talking about small business because I'm obsessed with it. Uh, like I said, I believe that's the lifeblood of any community. One of the goals of this show is that we want to inform people and be informative about the state of affairs of our quality of life and our condition. And sometimes that's hard to do without us having adequate civic information. And one of the things that we need to do, of course, we always hear we need to vote, right? But I want to explain some things regarding our civic structure or our government structure. And then I want to talk about the voter registration drive that I'm hosting this Sunday at 621 West 25th Avenue. So we're doing voter registration at 621 West 25th Avenue at Foodies, at the location for the Foodies restaurant right across the street from Roosevelt. And we have some volunteers that's going to go out and we're going to go door to door. We're going to try to encourage some people to vote. And we're not going to just knock on doors willy-nilly at random. We do have a list of the prospective doors we're going to knock on. And we do have a software that would give you the addresses and direct you to which doors to knock on. But we would love for some volunteers to come out. I'd love to get a couple of people to come out and sit at the restaurant and invite people over. And I'm going to invite people over and they can come in, register to vote. And voting, because we're governed by consent, as I said earlier in the show, when you don't vote, you consent to whatever you get. I'm going to say that again. When you don't vote, you consent to whatever you get. And it'd be those out there that disagree with me. I would love for someone to call in and explain that, not so we can have opposing views, so that the opposing views can be discussed for the purpose of us here getting an understanding of why some of us don't vote. So if you don't vote, call in and tell us why you don't vote at 219-885-1371. And if you do vote, call us and tell us why you do vote at 219-885-1371. We'd like to hear from both sides of the coin. However, we're unequivocally for voting. We recommend that you vote. We encourage it. And in fact, in the future, we plan to have some giveaways here on the show. And one of the qualifications, you have to be a registered voter to win the giveaways. So that's how adamant we are about the voting situation. But anyway, back to this governed by consent and me explaining a little bit about how our government works. Right now, whether we realize it or not, we are citizens in two places. We have in our country a centralized government, which is the federal government, and we have a state government. And the states, of course, have states' rights, and this is why we're the United States of America. Each state governs itself, and the states have various territories within those states that we call counties, and the counties have various municipalities within those counties. And all of the states have agreed by ratification to be a part of the union. And our federal government, they take care of things by having a Supreme Court. And this Supreme Court is our judicial branch of our federal government. And we have district courts too, and appellate courts as well. But the importance of the Supreme Court, usually they hear important cases that affect everybody in every place. And their rulings on those cases, like the most notable lately is this Roe Wade reversal, but the rulings on those cases affect everybody and we have to follow them. But the underlying theme of the Supreme Court is to make rulings on the constitutionality of the state activities. Sometimes they resolve disputes between two states. So they have automatic jurisdiction of resolving disputes between two states. So let's use the abortion issue, for example. Let's say abortion is outlawed in Indiana, but it's legal in Illinois. I can see ultimately Indiana and Illinois getting into a fight as to how our citizens go there and get abortions or whatever. So, but the states can fall into disputes with each other sometime and the Supreme Court settle it. At one time, you had a state trying to charge the federal government taxes or another state taxes for doing commerce in their state. And this led to a Supreme Court decision. And the Supreme Court is a very powerful court. In fact, it goes back to a case called Marbury, where the Supreme Court gave itself jurisdiction to resolve an issue. And it was during the time with the founding fathers, shortly thereafter the founding of the country. It was some appointments given out for justices of the peace in D.C. And when the new president took over, all of a sudden these unappointed appointment documents disappeared, or they were in limbo. And the Supreme Court was petitioned to enforce the issuing of these justice appointments. And anyway, to make a long story short, I'm citing as an example how the Supreme Court intervened on major issues that affect our country. And then, of course, you had the smaller courts, and most litigation between private people there in the smaller courts and in state courts, and addressed that way. And that's how we keep civility. We don't just meet in the street like in Old West and we shoot it out. So we keep civility by having smaller courts. Another branch of our government is the executive branch and the legislative branch. The legislative branch, particularly in Northwest Indiana, is very, very important because where we live, that branch directly dictates the quality of our lives because they institute laws and practices, or by consent and not necessarily instituting them or voting on them, condone laws or practices of agencies, or they pass on a certain level of authority to agencies, both state and sometimes local, to dictate how things are done where we live. And it's important that we know our legislators, we talk to them about our concerns, we find out what they have, not only just authority, but what insight they have on creating legislation that benefits us and benefits our interests specifically. And a lot of times we have what I call complaint hour, where we just sit around and we attack our legislators about what they didn't do, what we don't like that they did. And regrettably, some of these attacks are valid, but what invalidates them is the fact that we don't vote. And I'm going to say something that a lot of legislators won't say to you, and hopefully it'll be some of them that would appreciate this comment. It's hard to take up the shield and sword and combat for the concerns of a populace that don't vote at all. It's very difficult to do that. I'm not saying it's right that if I was a legislator, for example, I would give less weight to your concern than the next guy because he vote and you don't. But it matters. It matters. It's just like if you had a business and you had somebody gave an opinion about the services at your business, and you say, how often you come here? Oh, I don't. I never. So if someone's never patronizing your business, or they're never your customer, they never interact, forget the fact that they don't spend money with you. You would question in your own mind naturally, how do they have enough insight? And they could be right, but how do they have enough insight to give me advice on how to improve in what I'm doing if they don't participate in what I'm doing? So that's the unusual position that a lot of our legislators are left in. So we have to know our legislators. We have to know what I call their tentacles into our local government, because our legislators have people on the ground to acquire the votes that they have and get support for some of the things that they do. And so we have to get familiarize ourselves with those people, such as our precinct committee people. And I'm in the 5th district, and if I'm not mistaken, the precinct committee person for that district is Carl Weatherspoon. And I talk to Carl every now and then. I would anticipate that he's going to be trying to talk to me Sunday when I do the voter registration. But I think we all as citizens, if we're concerned about our quality of life in our immediate community, we should know who our precinct committee person is, and we should have someone among us who have the same interests, who can document and turn over to our committee person and or our legislative person our areas of concern, and make a formal request other than just openly saying you have to do something about this or that. With that being said, I'm gonna get off my soapbox on that issue, and I'm gonna check and see if we have another caller before I move on to the next topic, and we don't. So I'm gonna read the disclaimer again. The views expressed by the host and callers of this show are not necessarily the views of WLTH management, the owners or advisors and sponsors. And with that being said, I'm gonna move on to my next subject. Here on We the People, some of the issues we talk about is going to, later in other shows, are going to be somewhat controversial. And one of the things that I hope that we stay away from is that we bring up issues just because they're trending. And what I mean by that, sometimes in the social media world, we talk about things that are hot topics so we can monetize the issues. And I'm the last person in the world that want to monetize anybody's pain and suffering, or anybody's like right now, mental health is a hot issue. It's a big topic. And I have no problem inviting a professional on mental health to come in, talk about it. We share some data. Maybe we talk about a specific focus group that mental health is affecting drastically, and we bring awareness to the public. But I wouldn't invite two different speakers in and have opposing views on mental health, and one that says that there's no such thing as mental health, and have them have it out over the air so I can gain listeners and sell ads. I wouldn't do something like that. I think that'd be a disservice to the public, and it wouldn't be good for the people in general. But I'm saying that to say, to introduce or do a segue to the next topic I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about local extremism, right? Whether we are aware of it or not, we experience a lot of extremism where we are. And it spill over into our suggestions on how to fix our economic issues or problems. And one of the things that I listen to often, particularly in the AM, because I hear a lot of working people calling in doing the commute, they want to bring back the glory days of Northwest Indiana. We had a lot of industry. Everybody can have a job at the mill or factory jobs. And I understand that we have a blue collar existence. But if we study or take a snapshot of any municipality that has a healthy economy, they have a diversified economy. They have money coming in different ways, and they have different people that earn money different ways. And often, and sometimes we do it in our politics. And I'll give you a simple example. It's a trending or really hot social media page called The Other 98%, right? And there's no ride on the other 98%. But a lot of time they post things where they say things like, if the founder of Amazon took 1.9% of all his wealth, he can afford to pay for preschool for every kindergartner in the United States of America. And that's true. And that may be a true number. Bill Gates can afford to buy every American in the United States a big screen TV and still be a billionaire. But is buying us big screen televisions going to solve our problem? Education would, and good Head Start and good base education would solve many of our problems and help long term. But I ask, is it not Steve Jobs, is it Mark Zuckerberg or any of these other guys, is it their job to fix our kindergarten? Is that their job? And I'm not saying they shouldn't help. What I'm saying is that we shouldn't get into a government where we forget about the freedom and liberty and our pursuit of happiness, where we become almost, dictators. And we, as the phrase going around, we eat the rich and we take money from them. We have to remember and realize that people with wealth, so let's say I'm a upper middle class person with some money. You want me as your customer. You want me buying your goods and services. You don't want to marginalize me and alienate me just because I have. And yes, it's true. The group of people who have, it is a segment of our society that don't treat the have-nots fairly. But the have-nots should not commit to whether it's psychological or physical mob action, and the have-nots go out and they convince our government through the legislator to just take from the haves. That wouldn't be a good thing to do at all, or that wouldn't be a good practice to have. Now, that don't mean that we shouldn't have tax laws that are better. So what we need to do is present and have our legislator argue fair and better tax legislation, as opposed to these harmful posts where we marginalize people just because they're wealthy, irrespective of their conduct. I don't think that's a good thing to do. And I think it's many of us that plan to become wealthy. And I wouldn't think that if the good ship Gary, Indiana, I'm just using that as an example, if the economic situation here turned around over the next few years, and some of the everyday people that's here on the ground benefited from that, and those who didn't take action and work hard, I don't think they should resent them. That wouldn't be fair. And I don't think if they're in the minority, the people that benefited from the turnaround is in the minority, the majority shouldn't vote or by democratic mob action. That's what I call that, because the majority rule don't mean the majority is always right. That's why we had a constitution. The Constitution also protects the individual as well as the majority. But at any rate, I don't think that's right. Just because you have something, it belongs to someone else. And the reason why that's dangerous, it handicaps our political maturity. And we can have people that can give us crumbs from the table in exchange for our votes and support, or in exchange for us having tolerance or high tolerance for having a poor quality life, for being mismanaged, or with our government being mismanaged in some cases. So that's not a good thing to do, to practice extremism in that. With that being said, I'm going to segue or move over into another topic in the same vein. And I'm going to do that right after the break. And I thank you guys for listening. And I appreciate you. This is WLTH, show We the People, and we'll be back after the